8 years ago, while I was an intern at the United Nations Information Center in Lima, one afternoon my boss, who was the National Information Officer, came to my office and told me that I was invited to a country team meeting. Now these meetings are the place where all UN heads of agency in a country, they sit down and they talk. I was so excited to have the opportunity to be at that meeting, not only because I had been asking my boss for months to take me, but also, and more importantly, I really wanted to experience and see firsthand leadership and coordination. And because as it was then and it is now, it was always a goal of mine to have a seat in a table like that on the ground in a UN country team. Now, as the meeting passed, this meeting was in a beautiful UN room in Lima. The meeting was a little less formal than I had anticipated. I was the only person in the room wearing a tie. And of course, my job, the 18-year-old intern, I had to pass the microphone around to make sure that everybody heard each other. That was my job. But as I was moving around all the time, I was trying to absorb everything. I was trying to hear how these decisions are made. As the time passed, the agenda was tossed aside. The voices grew very loud. And I kept thinking to myself, this is gridlock. This is textbook definition of gridlock. There was no desire to cooperate beyond what was absolutely necessary. Each agency, they had their own territory, their own voice. They were not one. And I kept asking myself, well, how on earth are we ever going to achieve the Millennium Development Goals if we can't even work together? In fact, if we seem that we don't get along. And also, I was in a middle-income country. I was in Peru. How dire must be the UN fragmentation in a country where the UN has, 20-plus agencies? And it has the dire, and dare I say solemn, responsibility to feed millions of people every day. Now, the UN has a problem, and we need to discuss it. The fact of the matter is that my expectations, they ran headlong into reality. While the United Nations was created to be one organization, one family, one system, the fact of the matter is that the UN today remains a deeply fragmented organization, and we have to discuss that. Now, the UN is turning 70. That's fantastic, and that's a joyous occasion, and of course we have to celebrate. However, we would not be honoring this great hall, the seat of international justice, and the memory of Dag Hammarskjöld, if we would not also discuss our shortcomings and our challenges. Chief among them, the political blinders of the members, together with the deep bureaucratic entrenchments of the entire UN system. Well, together, they are rendering the UN borderline dysfunctional. Now, how can we change things? How can we make the UN better? Well, that question has been asked and is asked every day, and it's very complex. And the answer, equally complex. We've been discussing all day about this. Now, the answers can be, some of the key principles can be summed up in a few words. Number one, we must eradicate the profound fragmentation between all of the parts of the UN. It is no longer enough to say that we're going to deliver as one. We actually have to do it. It is time to endow national leaders like those in that meeting 8 years ago with sufficient authority to align budgets, avoid duplication of mandates, and actually work to the extent that agencies feel they are part of a whole, and they are not a whole by themselves. Now, Kofi Annan and many other of UN greats like Sergio Vieira de Mello, well, they fought their entire careers, and they used to say, the most important work of the UN is done on the ground. And they fought their entire career to make a change and to have a good impact in peace building and in development. Now, if we are to honor their legacies, look back, but also look forward, well, the UN must finally show sufficient courage to look at itself and ask difficult questions, and have sufficient political courage to make painful decisions for the good of the system, but more importantly, for the good of us, because we are the people. So yes, it is incumbent upon us to make these changes, and we are in the absolute perfect juncture to enact them. The UN just pledged sustainable development by 2030. Now, if we are to achieve these highly multidimensional and ambitious targets on time, on budget, and in somewhat coordinated way, well done. We need to start making changes. And we have to start today. Thank you very much.